Hello, everybody. Live as live can be for the 50th episode. Unbelievable that I've done 50 of these things of the Texas Real Estate and Finance Podcast. My name is Mike Mills. I am a lender here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and this podcast idea is just basically to try to bring information to mortgage professionals and real estate professionals about the industry itself, and kind of trends that are occurring and how to just kind of become better at your job every single day. So today, to help me with that, I am bringing in Miss Allie Carty. Hello, Allie.
Hey, Mike. Happy to be here.
I even got applause and all this kind of stuff. It's like real
Yeah.
production value we're throwing down. Thank you for coming in. So Allie is older than 15, I promise. Even though she seems
Really?
young, she's doing her community service and helping out old people today. So I appreciate you for doing that. But Allie is a Gen Z guru. Okay, so what is a Gen Z guru exactly? Well, these days we have lots of different people that we're trying to sell to in our market. We have the boomers, we have the Gen Xers, the millennials, and now moving into the market is Gen Z. And this is one of the bigger segments that's really starting to take hold of the real estate market because now, more and more these days with the information that's out there, people are understanding the value of owning real estate and being a homeowner versus renting, even though as it currently stands, when you look at the price of homes and the cost of a mortgage, it's quite a bit more than rent right now. But this market's changed and they're cyclical. And if you go back to 2021, Gen Z was buying homes at a greater pace than their parents, which is the Gen X's. So I could almost be your dad, by the way, Allie. So that's kind of how all this works. But because of that, I do think having Allie on to kind of tell us a little bit about what we can expect for our future clients that are coming down the pipe, which are these Gen Z buyers, what to look for, kind of how to market to them, what they care about, all that kind of stuff. So let's just get kind of right into it, Allie. First off, I want to know how a 24-year-old becomes a Gen Z guru. Kind of tell me your path a little bit. Tell me how we got here.
Man, well, first of all, Mike, you're making all these jokes about how I am so much younger, but you have outbeat me in this podcast. I love everything you're doing, the whole intro, major slay. That is my word. I will probably use it a lot. But I am so happy to be here. I love what you're doing. I love your whole setup. So I am thoroughly impressed as a 24-year-old with everything that you are doing from a marketing point of view. So bravo.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes. And so Gen Z guru, honestly, I'm still trying to figure it out. All my girlfriends are like, what are you doing? But really, I am just hoping to bridge the gap between my generation and our industry. Right. Like you mentioned, we're slowly filling the role that millennials just had of being new to the home buying market. I am 24. I'm actually having conversations with prospective first-time home buyers in my personal life. So whether it's going to happy hours, bachelor wine nights, doing things with my girlfriends on the weekends, how can I help bridge the gap from the conversations we're having outside of work to bring them to the table in the mortgage industry? And so I grew up in a household, my mom and dad are both in the industry, and I don't really think I would have found this niche without them being there. So I'm really thankful to be here. And I, alongside bringing home ownership to my generation, I also hope to bring, career opportunities and more Gen Zers into our industry, because I don't think that there is enough talk at a college level about career opportunities. But really sparked this interest. I was at a conference back in January, and it was probably my 5th or 6th conference. I started with Active Comply back in June. And I realized everyone knows mortgage. Nobody knows Gen Z. And so as I've sat through conference after conference, I was in California at MBA, Independent Mortgage Bankers Conference. And I finally was sitting in a session that was about marketing to Gen Z. And I was like, goodness gracious, I can actually attest to this. Everyone's talking about their niece, their nephew, their daughter. And I'm like, I am that person. So how can I help our industry better understand what we need to do to market to Gen Z? And so from that conference, I spoke with, I don't know if you know Kevin Peranio, he does a lot of great videos on LinkedIn. And I said, listen, KP, I want to help our industry somehow and provide a new perspective. What do you think about me doing these videos? Like, I know you do videos. Can I do it too? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, but I don't want to be this naive young girl who's already at the conferences. And he's like, just do it. And so I just jumped into it. And I will say, I totally understand any loan officers that are very hesitant to create video content. I was so nervous posting my first video to LinkedIn. But the industry was super encouraging and supportive, which I appreciate anyone that has hyped up any of my content. But from there, it really just spun into different video series. I started with surveys with 200 Gen Z individuals who participated. The population ranged between 150 and 200. I always like to say that. So, and I wasn't reaching all the underserved markets, but it still was a great representation of kind of where I'm coming from a Gen Z perspective, how to market to us, what social media are we on the most? What's the biggest obstacle between homeownership and you right now? 76% want to buy a home within the next 5 years. How can I help them do that? Yeah. And so then from there, I had a lot of people that were like asking me to help them finance a home in my life. And I was like, I can't do that. I can connect you with someone, but let's have a conversation about it.
Right.
And so after the surveys, I really have transitioned into one-on-one interviews, much like what we're doing today, Mike. But I'm speaking with Gen Z individuals who either are prospectively wanting to buy a home or just bought a home, and just asking about the process. Where can it improve? What was the biggest surprise? How can we better help you as a borrower to make the process easier in the future? And it's just been really fun for me. So like this podcast, this is so fun, and it's been really just a way to create content like you and I were talking about. And it's really spiraled into something I'm excited about and hoping to see like a long-term effect in our industry as more people in my age group move into the home buying process.
So both of your parents were in the industry. What did they do?
So my dad, he retired when I was born, so I didn't ever really get to see him do as much. My mom is a boss. She was the breadwinner of our family growing up, but she went through all these different, in her first, then she went to AB and AMRO, Citi. I got to see her go through all these different roles. But
so she was in the banking world?
She is. Now she's with Chase in their home lending division.
Okay.
Ooh, so she's a rock star. She is just she's paved the way and really encouraged me and supported me. And then my dad is also amazing. But either way, mortgages are just like, I don't know if you saw my recent contribution to FinTalk, but I contributed to this financial literacy newsletter, and I moved to Nashville in January of 2022, and I met these girls, and I was like, we met actually through a best friend dating app, which is
Wait. So hang on, a best friend dating app? So like you're not actually looking for a date, but you're looking for a best friend. Is that how it works?
Okay. So it's like, that's another Gen Z thing. I talk about this at conferences. People are like, how did you make friends in a virtual environment? I downloaded this app. I'll plug them, Bumble BFF. And
Bumble BFF. What's up, Dan?
Bumble BFF. So I downloaded it, made a group of about 10 girlfriends here in Nashville. And they're like, so what do you do for work? Like, they're all like, oh, I work in retail. I do this. And I'm like, oh, I work in the mortgage industry. And we're all just like, yeah. And so a month goes by and I'm like, oh, I'm going to a work conference. They're like, Allie, what is the mortgage industry? And I'm like, you go like, what? And they're like, what is it? And I'm like, it's how you finance a home. And they're like, oh, I just didn't know. And it's like, that should not be a thing. We should know what the mortgage industry is. They know what the real estate industry is, but they don't really know like the idea behind financing it. And so that was just a whole nother mind-blowing thing when all my girlfriends, we were at a wine night and they were like, honestly, none of us can understand what you do. And I'm like, ugh.
Well, it's kind of funny because I think in, you know Kristen Missarelli, right? As well.
Yeah.
You're like her Padawan.
We actually had a call this morning talking about first home IQ and her next gen home buyer report. So
yes. Brian knows all about Bumble BFF. So, I've actually interviewed Kristen before. We've talked. She's actually been at a few of our sales rallies for our company and spoken. And, I always tend to see when it comes to people in my business, especially, the old folks like myself, we look and go, okay, this younger person, what do they have to offer in this situation? Like, how do they know? I've been doing this. That's my favorite. I've been doing this for 25 years. I know more than you've ever forgotten.
Yeah.
And the truth is that you have to constantly take on new perspectives, because if you're going to continue to grow and you're going to continue to market and sell to the next generation of home buyers, and people that are coming up with the means and the ability to purchase. I mean, there's a thing that's happening right now where there's this massive transfer of wealth between the baby boomers and, millennials and Gen Z, because all of the baby boomers are retiring. They're downsizing their homes. They have more savings in retirement than any generation beyond right now because they rigged the system for themselves. Congratulations to those guys. But either way, there's a transfer of wealth that's occurring, and that transfer is going to somebody, right? It's going to end up with someone. Well, more than likely, that's going to be the either Gen X, millennials, Gen Z. So to not have an understanding of how to sell and how to market and how to create education for those people, then, or for that next generation of customer, you're really putting yourself at a disadvantage. And so to be short-sighted and say that, well, because you're 24 years old, how could you possibly have perspective? Well, if you were going to go, not to compare Gen Z to, say, dolphins, right? But let's just say I'm a marine biologist and I'm going to study dolphins. Well, I'm not going to ask whales about how dolphins interact. I'm not going to ask, the salmon how the dolphins communicate with each other. I'm going to go talk to the dolphins, right? Assuming they could speak.
Yeah.
But the idea is that you have to get it from the horse's mouth. You have to talk to that generation. What you're doing is these anecdotal conversations that you're having with people in your sphere, whether it be your friends, people you went to college with, people in the industry. You are putting perspective on what it's going to take in order for a Gen Z home buyer to want to pick up the phone and call you should they be looking to buy or sell their home or get a mortgage. And I don't want to underscore the importance of that, because just because you're not 50 years old and been doing it for 25 years does not mean that you don't have proper perspective and can offer a lot of value to the conversation. So how have you been adjusting to dealing with that in our industry of having a bunch of, old dudes come and tell you, what could you possibly teach them?
That's a great question. And I will start off by saying, I think I've received a lot more support than I have, like, hey, no, not interested. A lot of people have been more encouraging towards what I'm doing and kind of the movement around bringing homeownership to Gen Z. So that has been great to see. But I think ways that I have been able to overcome it is just showcasing instances where, like, people in my generation, in some of the different interviews or podcasts I've participated in, I've shared, like, we just have different tendencies or go-tos, such as, like, I shared with Dave Savage last week. We are not going to turn to Google. We are going to turn to TikTok. And so not until, like, people who have been doing it 20 years, embrace, hey, there actually is going to be change. I don't know how to change their mind, but I could say that I could see them really losing out on opportunities with Gen Z borrowers. And that would really be my only, like, way to overcome that objection. I think really just looking at my videos, seeing what I'm bringing to the table. One thing that I wanted to share with you today is I opened my phone to Instagram today, and this is going to be very real content that I'm going to share with you. But I had a friend who sent me this Instagram reel that she saw, and she said, hey, is this true? And it was basically, sorry, I have music going on it. How much of a house can you afford? I know you can barely see that,
yep,
but
no,
it basically says, how much of a house can you afford?
Yep.
And she sent it to me and was like, is this true? Then that was yesterday morning. This morning, she sent me something on you should buy a house as soon as you humanly possibly can. She's interacting with this content. She's researching it. So those lenders, those leaders who are like, oh, I've been in the industry 20 years. I don't need to embrace social media. I don't need to attract Gen Z borrowers. That's where we're turning. That's where we're getting our information. So to the individuals who are a little less hesitant to jump on the Gen Z train, I think only time will tell where our industry transpires. Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah. Well, you said something about the whole Google versus TikTok thing. And, I personally, so I wasn't on using TikTok hardly at all. I mean, I have a daughter that's 15 and I have a son that's 13. And it started off, it was Musically. Remember that one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it basically started off as like Musically. And so my daughter was like, they're doing all their dances and all this stuff. And I'm like, ah. And then it kind of transitioned over into TikTok. And the thing about TikTok is, as an adult, right, my initial introduction to TikTok was, okay, I need to start making content and putting stuff on there, right? Well, with any social media platform that you post content on, it's also a good habit to interact as well, because that's how you get more, a little bit more eyeballs, traction, and everything if you're interacting with other content also. And so the problem with TikTok, though, is that you fall into those TikTok holes where you end up, 3 hours, down a rabbit hole of looking stuff up. But I do find myself as a 45-year-old man now, instead of going to Google and typing in something specifically that I'm looking for, I actually will go to TikTok. And I've caught myself typing in Google because it's habit, right? I'm just creating a habit. I've already done this before. And then I scroll. I'm like, what am I doing? And then I'll go over to TikTok and I'll type in the same thing. And I've got 30 videos that I can now scroll through.
And it explains it like through a video. And so I think another crazy thing that I've witnessed through TikTok and through my interviews is people aren't going to TikTok and typing in how to buy a home, but somehow the way, and some people are, and like it's showing up on popular pages, but the algorithm behind TikTok, if people are talking about buying a home, if people are searching it, somehow TikTok is pulling it up on your For You page.
Yes.
So if it's top of mind for that prospective borrower and they're out there and they're doing their own independent research, whether or not they're going to TikTok and distinctly typing in how to finance a home, it's going to show up based on hashtags, algorithms. It's going to show up on their For You page.
Yes.
And that's the craziest part. As I've started doing interviews, I've been like, hey, are you guys like turning to TikTok to look at financing a home? And they're like, not necessarily, but now that you mention it, it's all over my For You page because that's what I'm taught. It's so crazy. It's what I'm talking about. It's what I'm Googling. Yep. It's really like turning into what they're talking about and looking at all the time. So the TikTok rabbit hole is very indicative of what's top of mind for that consumer.
Well, the good and the bad thing about social media and anything on the internet, because again, the olds will say, oh, well, they're spying on you and they're watching your every move and all this kind of stuff. And you know what? That's true to a certain extent. Okay, they are. And TikTok, has the bad rap because it's a Chinese-based app, originally created. But then people don't understand how much information Google collects on you all the time. And if anything, they're a worse proponent of that than TikTok. And so, again, social media and what you see in your feed is what you make it, right? Yeah. So if you want to see cat videos and you want to see, goofy dances, then that's what you'll see. But like my feed is filled with real estate people, finance information, conspiracy theories, health and fitness. And occasionally I have a cat video bleed over because that's where most of my wife spends her time. And she'll send me videos from time to time doing that. So it is what you create, and it gets such a bad rap because of all the media attention around the negative side of tracking your information and spying on you and all this kind of other stuff. Which again, there's issues with that for sure. But at the end of the day, it's there. So there's nothing you can do about it. If you want to interact with the planet, that's what you're going to have to do. So
and I think our generation is just kind of like, who has my information at this point? Like
everybody.
We've grown up in a virtualized environment where like I talk to my dad. My dad is almost 70. And he's just like, I can't give you my credit card information over the phone. I'm like, Dad, yes, you can. Like I set it up like, and so
he's been hacked 600 times.
There's such a difference. And he's like, Alexandra, get off TikTok. I'm like, Dad, it's just, that's how our generation is. And I think I did a survey that was like, hey, does the TikTok, correlation with China scare you? Like 57% were like, no. It does not scare me. I do not care who has my data because at this point, when you're raised from like 9 or 10 getting your first iPhone, what data were you giving away at 9 or 10 that they don't have today?
Yes. Well, I argue with my wife from time to time about the whole idea of the surveillance state, right? Because when our kids were with their iPads, with their phones, we are constant. I know where my daughter is right now. I can get on my phone and I can look and see where she is right this second. And I can see what she's been doing all day, where she went, who she called. I can see everything, right? So our kids have grown up in an environment of being constantly surveyed. And again, I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying that that's what it is.
It's what it is.
You can't change it at this point. We're so far down that rabbit hole that there's no turning it around without some serious legislation and all that, which there's too many corporate interests involved that would be way against, any kind of like lockdown on people's privacy. So your data's out there, your information's out there. And so the next step of it is as a salesperson or anybody in a profession where you're trying to market to individuals, you have to embrace that technology and you have to be able to use it in a way that your customers are going to digest it, right? So if they're going to take it in, you have to create content, you have to create information that's available to them. So speaking on that, when it comes to Gen Z specifically, talk about financial literacy and how important it is. You mentioned earlier about your friends having no idea what a mortgage even was. So
Right.
how important is it for the next generation of home buyer to make sure that they have a base of knowledge for all that stuff?
Oh, I think it's going to be so important. And that's why my conversation with Kristen earlier today was so exciting for me, because I think financial literacy is very lacking in my generation. The fact that I graduated with a 4-year degree and I have no knowledge of how credit impacts, my longevity financially, or just what goes into buying a home, what goes into, financing a car, different things that like should be talked about at a high school level, much less if I'm paying you to teach me stuff.
Right.
At least teach me the stuff that I'm going to need to know when I graduate.
Right.
That's besides the point. I could go on, but I think that financial literacy is going to be really, really important when it comes to building trust with Gen Z borrowers. For instance, the 2 videos I just showed you, that my friend, she's out there, she's on these she's very financially savvy. And I will say about Gen Z, a lot of my friends and a lot of the interviews I've had, people are very frugal. People want to make sure that they're being smart about their money. I don't know where it comes from, but there's very few of my friends that are thinking about buying a home, but also thinking about like the financial impact that will have on them long term. So my friend, she's a med student, and so she has a ton of student loans, and she's very like just stressed about that. But she also doesn't want to miss out on the opportunity to buy a home, because there's all these headlines about low inventory. There's like all these big firms who are buying out real estate and renting it out.
Yep.
That's what my friends are seeing right now. How can a loan officer or a realtor take the time to sit down and explain to them really what the financial benefits are, putting the borrower first, being like, hey, listen, maybe this isn't right for you right now. You're about to apply for a school in Pennsylvania. You don't want to buy a house in South Florida.
Right.
So it's putting the borrower first, but it's also like, hey, Blackfin may be buying a ton of real estate nationwide, but here's the timeline that would work for you. And this is why, they're doing that and what the implications could have on our generation in the future. Financial education is going to be huge. And so everyone, I know Brian's on here, and Greg and Dan, I think a lot of us have a similar goal to bring financial education at an earlier stage and really use social media as a platform to have those conversations.
Would you say with your generation that when it comes to, so the financial literacy is important 100%, but it from where I'm at, or, back in my day, we would have a conversation, we'd have coffee, we'd go meet with, somebody would call and we'd talk to them for an hour. But I think nowadays, and correct me if I'm wrong, there has to be a certain level of trust that's already been established with that individual before your generation is going to pick up and make the phone call, right? Because if they've never seen me online, if I'm not recommended to them by their parents, right, then the odds of me getting that phone call or them touching base is next to zero. But on the flip side of that, if you have 2 opportunities, you have mom and dad recommend you because you've been helping them sell their house or do your mortgage for 20 years or whatever, right? Or they've seen you on TikTok, or they've seen you on Instagram, or they've seen you on, I noticed the younger people are moving over to Facebook these days, by the way. Yes, unfortunately I get my 15-year-old daughter's friends that want to friend me on Facebook. I'm like, I don't think so. But, but the idea is that the more they see you in different places, offering a little bit of information, giving value, right? You're not up there saying, call me now and I will be your mortgage officer, or call me, I'm going to be your realtor. You're saying, hey, here's what to look for when you're buying a home. Here's how your payment works. Here's how much money you're going to need. Here's the types of loans available to you. That information builds trust with the consumer, who then is going to take that and then call you. And if mom also recommended you at the same time, then that just doubly puts you in a spot of authority in that situation. Would you agree?
Huge. I totally agree. I think as I've been doing these interviews, and one thing that my mom, I showed her one of the recent interviews that I did with Dave Savage. She was like, Allie, it was so interesting because she didn't really realize this till I told her, like, loan officers that don't have a social presence, like, they may not be getting traction right now. And I know Greg and I have talked about this. It takes like 100 posts before you maybe see something that is going to generate traction. But for a borrower or a prospective borrower, we're going to go to social media to see if they're credible, if they have content, because if they don't have social media, no shot they're getting our business, which sounds maybe they'll get, I don't mean to be very pessimistic, but I'm just saying, like, as a consumer, like, for instance, today I'm going to a concert tonight and we're going to get dinner. So my girlfriends and I before at like 6:30 and I'm on my phone trying to figure out where I want to eat. I go to TikTok, restaurants in East Nashville around this arena. 5 different restaurants. I do research. I look at their Instagram, look at their TikTok, look at their Yelp. I see where I want to eat. I don't make a single phone call, but they get my business because of what their presence is on social media.
Right. You have validation online for what they do.
Right. And my mom might have turned to Google. I don't know what she would do, but
we use Yelp.
Text someone, hey, where should we eat? Yeah. I want to see the vibe. I want to see what it looks like on TikTok. Like you said, I want to see a video demonstration of whatever you're Googling through TikTok. I want to see what the place looks like. I want to see people they've worked with from a loan officer perspective. Some suggestions I would have for loan officers is sharing success. Yes, TikTok's the new Google. Sharing success stories, having a recent client get on a video with you like this. Hey, what'd you like? What was surprising? What was the hardest thing for you to like wrap your head around as a first-time home buyer? That content's great. Posting Instagram stories. I think this is very underrated. Post an Instagram story with a question in it. Whether it's like, hey, what's your, I think I shared this yesterday with someone, post and say, which is your ideal home, like vibe. I said the word vibe. And I would suggest putting a couple different images. That may not get you business right away, but it's getting the borrower thinking, ooh, I love the way that looks. Let me screenshot this. Let me save it. Oh, I want to talk to a realtor about this. Oh, look at this house. And it's getting engagement. So you're seeing followers engage with your content. And I know that went on a total spiral.
No. So you think Instagram stories is a good place? What is it about stories specifically that you think with your generation as opposed to, I'm an old guy, get on Instagram. I will get on there from time to time, but primarily if I'm on Instagram, I'm posting stuff or I'm trying to interact a little bit with other people realtors and stuff that I work with. But, I don't think about stories much because I don't use stories. I don't use the platform as like a general browser, I guess you would call it. So I do reels, and those bleed over into your posts that naturally you can feed them over to, but I never really dive into stories. What is it about stories that you think is the biggest, has such an impact?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, I love that you're doing post and reels too, because that's keeping consistent. Like I said, when a borrower looks you up, they're going to see you're really reliable. You have great content. So keep that up. But 2, I think Instagram stories is a great way to see who is viewing your stuff, but they may not necessarily interact. So for instance, the girl that just sent me those 2 reels back to back and was like, hey, what about this? Do you think the housing market's crashing? She didn't comment or like those videos herself, but she sent them to me. So she follows those people and she's viewing their things. So you're seeing who's viewing it.
So it's a little bit of intel then. You can see who's
you can see who's a little bit curious, and it's not like they want to be poached with like inbounds, like, hey, let's talk about buying a home.
Right.
But it's more so like, hey, if they interact, comment back. Like you kind of have, I feel like stories is a good way. Like the amount of times I'm on, like, I'll be eating my lunch, just clicking through stories. It's really quick. Like if you're running downstairs, I'm in the elevator clicking through stories. And if people put a survey up, I'll respond to it. I'm not
one click. Yeah.
Like they're like, hey, which house do you like better? Ooh, and you actually have an opinion.
Right.
So I think that's a really big way to get interaction on your content and see who is opinionated about the home buying process is like posting different things in a home, whether it's from a realtor perspective, but I also encourage loan officers to do that because you're the finance behind the home. I had one interview where he was like, I realized the loan officer had the key to how I was going to afford this house. So while the realtor can show it to me and talk about how great it would be, the loan officer was the only reason I was going to be able to afford it and talk through like the actual living in the house and how month to month it was going to work.
Yeah.
So I think loan officers and realtors can both utilize social media to engage borrowers because the financing of a home is so important, but it's not necessarily the sexiest part of the home.
Well, it's not sexy until you have to do it. And then you want to know everything there is to know about it.
Yeah. And so I think, but highlighting the home itself and just the empathy and the emotional connection within a borrower when it comes to buying a home, loan officers, I think, can still do that without feeling like they're the realtor.
Right.
I think engaging conversations. Hey, what do you think about this home? My interview last week was with the 24-year-old who bought a home here. in Nashville, and she is redoing the rental property attached to her home.
Mhm.
And I have just loved engaging with her content because it's like, should I leave my cabinets on or off? You know, and it's just like the design aspect, especially with single women home buyers. I think that that will be a huge one. You know, Instagram stories showcasing the like paint the picture of owning a home.
Right.
And Instagram stories, you know, they don't feel like they have to like it, but they're still viewing it, and you know they still saw it.
So if you were talking to a realtor or a lender that hasn't really engaged or gotten involved much with social media, period, what, you know, because it can seem overwhelming, right? Because when they go and see your stuff and see, oh, man, she's on there every day and she's interviewing all these people, and then they'll see, you know, because it's the 80-20 rule, just like anything else, right? You go on Instagram or you go on TikTok and you're going to see, you know, 80% of the content from the same 20% of the people that are doing it on a regular basis. So it can seem like, well, I'm never going to be able to put a dent into that, right? Because if I just make my one video, nobody's going to care. So what would you say to somebody that had that mentality? And then where would they, like, what's the easiest place to start? Just say, hey, just do this or just try this. What would you suggest?
So when it comes to really getting started on socials, I think, like I mentioned earlier, 100 videos before you tell me you can't. Okay. Post 100 things and then tell me, hey, this isn't working. But it really is a long game, social media. And getting started, take it from me. I'm a 24-year-old in the mortgage industry. Everyone already has an opinion about me being in the conference scene. So to jump on social media and start talking about like my generation, how I'm going to add value, I was really nervous. But I was like, you know what? My biggest regret is going to be not trying. And so that's what I tell any loan officers that are DMing me. Hey, where do I start? I'm like, honestly, just jump on there. If they don't like it, screw them.
Yeah.
Like that's just my thing. It's like,
well, you know, I would say, how often have you even really gotten negative responses? Because I mean, I've been doing it for a little while now and I don't get a ton of traction all the time everywhere, but I mean, very rarely does anybody ever have anything negative to say, at least in my experience.
Yeah. And I think especially from a loan officer perspective, you can repurpose content. So really just start, I get a ring light, $20, get it. It'll make you feel better about yourself. I like TikTok because I like the way that you can edit the videos. It's really user friendly. And if anyone has any questions about that, reach out to me. I would happily talk about how to use TikTok from a editing point of view, because I know my mom is like, Ollie, this is way over my head. But it's really not that hard.
TikTok. How do we use the
TikTok? So I would just create a video, whether it's on your camera roll, it's on your Instagram, on TikTok, just create a video talking genuinely. And one person that I want to highlight, I don't even know who he is with, but this gentleman reached out to me when I started doing my video content. He's like, hey, I want to reach Gen Z borrowers. I'm going to get on TikTok. I'm like, do it. And so he followed me. He was one of the first loan officers to actually engage in my content and like take a call to action. And so I followed him, and I don't know, maybe he's late 40s, early 50s, but he's not a 20-year-old who's like so confident in social media. And he had said that to me before, and he was like, I don't really know where to start. And I'm like, just post a video about what you want to help borrowers do. Hey, I want to help you get into your first home. You know, here's some big misconceptions. If this is you, reach out to me. He's getting like 900 to like 1,200 views per post.
Wow.
And amazing. He's getting like 18 comments. And while they may not always be the most optimistic, I will say some of the comments are like, I can't afford a home. Like the government's working against me, but it's an inbound. You can respond to it and be like, hey, let's talk about it. Here's my number. Give me a call. Yeah. But the fact that he is an individual who is not social media savvy and had told me about it and was like, I just want to try, bravo to him. And the fact that he's getting 900,000 views per video, that means people are looking up mortgages on TikTok.
Right.
That means that my hashtag get to know Gen Z is getting 300 views, but hashtag mortgage is getting 1,000 views.
Yeah.
So the loan officers that aren't embracing video content, TikTok, Instagram Reels, it may be really scary, but it's going to be even scarier in 10 years when that's what you had to have in order to have a portfolio to gain business with Gen Z borrowers.
Yeah, we're already behind the curve if you're not doing it, unfortunately. I mean, I even feel like I've been doing it now for about not quite a year yet, but on a regular basis at least. And I feel like I'm way behind the curve, even just getting into it. So, you know, I can imagine what it's going to be like in 5 or 10 years when the vast majority of information that people consume comes from these type of platforms. And if you're not represented there, and oh, by the way, with blockchain and Web3 and all the stuff that's coming down the pipe that direction too. There's a whole other realm of the world that we're not even familiar with yet that's going to start having an impact as well. I'm curious. So in your conversations with, that you have, because you have the conversations on Friday with the Gen Z?
Yeah, it's Get to Know Gen Z Friday. All my friends in Nashville know. Allie can't talk. It's Get to Know Gen Z Friday.
So when you're talking to those Gen Zers on Fridays, what are you finding as a first-time home buyer is the biggest concern that they're having? Like, what's the main thing that keeps coming up over and over again as far as, what they're trying to either find out or what they're concerned about when it comes to buying a house?
So I think that can be answered two ways. I think really the biggest obstacle that I'm seeing is the education point.
Okay.
But really what they're struggling with, they've acknowledged they want to buy a home. Gen Zers make up 60%. Sorry, I want to read it just so I make sure.
It says Gen Zers make up 16% of all originations in the U.S. and 81% of them open a new credit card in Q4 of 2022. Everyone should focus on their social media strategy, which I would very much agree, Martin.
Agreed, Martin. Thanks for joining. Completely agree with that. I think education, especially around opening credit cards, is not always discussed.
Yep.
You walk into any mall and they're like, hey, you want to open a credit card, 20% off? Sign me up.
20%. Yeah, let's do this.
So great point. But from a obstacle point of view, they've acknowledged, hey, I want to buy a home. It's the prices, which isn't great. But I will say I've sat through all these conferences since I joined in June, which is a really hard time to join. And everyone is like, interest rates. Nobody's talking about interest rates in my inner circle and my peer group and my interviews. They're talking about home prices. The single women borrowers are talking about safety, security. As I can afford a $400,000 house. It's not in the safest part of town, in Nashville, at least, South Florida. And I just think that a lot of the conversations are around, the financial obligations behind it. But also, I would encourage loan officers, have a conversation around it.
Yeah.
One funny thing, and I don't want a ton of inbounds from this, but I have not been approached by a single loan officer in my journey to homeownership. So my lease ends in October. And this is me just saying, Blake, my colleague, he's 25. He also wants to buy a home at the end of the year. No loan officers have reached out to us. And I'm not saying reach out to me now. I'm not saying that.
You're going to get inundated, Allie, especially if
I will figure it out. My mom is in the business. I will have a great person to talk to. But
we have a branch in Nashville, by the way, if you need to talk to somebody.
Okay, great. But really the point of me saying that is, if I'm not getting reached out to, who is?
Yeah.
If I am out here saying I want to buy a home in October and I know that's far away, people should be trying to build a relationship with me right now.
Right.
Don't do it. I've already had this conversation before. I will figure it out. But if they aren't reaching out to me, who are they reaching out to? Right. I'm not saying DM everyone that interacts with your content, but posting stories, who responds to your stories, posting a question on your story. That is huge. And that is something that I think Gen Z borrowers will interact with. I don't know. I can see you looking to the side. Do you know what I'm talking about when you say post a question?
Yeah. You're just asking for interaction is what you're looking for. So whatever type of question you can put up there, the idea, that's a pretty, as old school as you can get in social media of the, if you go talk to the coaches, right? The ones that say, hey, here's how you do social media. One of the very first things they'll ask you to do, it doesn't matter your industry, it doesn't matter what you're doing, is to say, what's your favorite car? Or, they just want people to interact with the post, right? So that when you're asking a question, you're looking for interaction. That's the goal.
Yes. And so, but through Instagram stories, if you build a brand around mortgage, you want to talk about financing a home, post an Instagram story with a fill in the blank. Hey, what's your biggest obstacle in home ownership? People who may not necessarily want to be hit up on the phone. I know Greg and I have talked, it's really important. Gen Z does not love phone calls. It's more email, text message, virtual.
Yes, I've discovered that myself.
Yes.
By the way, on that too, I had a friend of mine who's an insurance guy, old guy like myself. He was getting text messages from one of our borrowers that we were working with together at 11 o'clock at night or 5 a.m. or whatever. It's like, hang on. they don't expect you to respond right then. They're just in the
No.
middle of doing something like, oh, I need to send this message. So they
Yes.
send it, and then you can respond whenever. We're used to, like, if someone texts me like, oh, I gotta get with them right away, you know, but that's not that, at least my experience, that's not what y'all are looking for.
Well, and I think that I've seen kind of the opposite being in this business as a 24-year-old, you know, that's how my mentality is. You know, when I see it on my phone, I'm like, oh, I'm going to respond right now.
Yeah.
If someone doesn't respond to me for 48 hours, fine. I don't take offense to it. But like my mom would be like, oh my gosh, they didn't get back to me.
Well, 48 hours is probably a little extreme, but at least, you know.
See, but I think that like if I'm like trying to like for instance, if I'm trying to schedule a meeting for next week and I'm like, hey, how does this time work? If you respond Saturday morning at 8 a.m., okay, that works for me. I mean, I might respond and say, hey, the time slot's been filled, but I'm not going to take offense to it.
Yeah.
And I also think that as a consumer, if a borrower takes a little bit longer to respond, 48 hours is a lot as a consumer. But within the next like 12 hours, if they text you at 11 p.m., text them back by like 2 p.m. the next day, fine. But yeah, so I do think that there will be a difference, you know, as we are moving through this virtualization age. But I also think our generation has expectations that were not there with millennials.
Okay.
Such as I was talking to Kristen this morning. I went to the grocery store. They were out of my dog's dog food. I don't want to change his dog food, so Amazon's going to deliver it tomorrow.
Right.
We have those expectations. And I don't know how our industry will react as we get more innovative and automated. But I think as Gen Z moves into that home ownership process, I had one interview where their title agent took too long and my friend lost his home.
Title's my favorite.
Do you as I've been in the industry, I've heard that there's a lot of timeliness that is involved and sometimes things take longer than usual. I am going to be very interested to see how that evolves as our generation moves into these expectations within the home buying process.
Well, see, part of the problem is, and this has been a mortgage industry issue for a long time, is, you know, and I bark about this all the time, where someone says, you know, your file, like if you're a borrower and you're going through the process and you pick up the phone and you call the loan officer, if you don't call them during banking hours, you're probably not going to get them, which is ridiculous. And then the second thing is that when you ask the question, you know, I haven't heard anything a while, or what's going on, the answer a lot of times is like, oh, it's been an underwriting, you know, the underwriter, you know, this is just one example, underwriter. Well, the reality is in our world that it takes, when an underwriter picks up a file, okay, to review it, it might take them 3 hours, maybe, you know, 3 or 4 hours, and especially these days, maybe even less, because there's so many things that are automated. But now the process of going through underwriting could take 24 to 48 hours, depending on what the company's expectation is on once a file is submitted to underwriting, how long it takes. But if someone's telling you that your underwriters, or that your file has been in underwriting for a week, they're just not telling you the whole story, because there's something else that's going on. And I think, you know, and this is every consumer, this just isn't Gen Z. They just want to be told the truth. Like, just tell me the
transparency.
truth. Yes. Just don't let me feel like you're lying to me. Like, when you tell me something, it may be bad news. It might be something I don't want to hear, but I need to know. And the bigger issue really comes around a lot of times with loan officers in some cases is that, because, you know, everybody kind of knows their little section of the river, let's call it. Like, I know this part, but I don't know this part that well. And nobody likes to feel stupid. And so what ends up happening is people will make mistakes. They will do something that they could have caught in the beginning, but they didn't know, or they made a mistake, or whatever the case may be. And instead of owning it and just saying, you know what, I missed this, or yeah, this was something that we weren't ready for, or whatever the case may be, they're just trying to spin every example and every reason why it's not their fault, and the underwriter and title, and it's everybody else's issue. And consumers just get sick of that, because they're just like, look, whatever happened, whatever's going on, I need to know. Because at that point, if they've got their loan with you, they're pretty much pot committed. Like, we're in this thing together. So let's get it across the finish line. Just be honest with me.
I think transparency will be a huge expectation. And like you said, it's with every borrower, not just Gen Z. But I always like to use this pizza analogy that I was reading about. National Mortgage News published something about Gen Z borrowers, and I was reading it. And our generation, this was just a great example, like the Dolphins, very random. But I, like when I go to order pizza, I expect to have the ability to track the driver through my app.
Okay.
Not having that, not as attractive to me as a consumer.
I don't expect that at all. That makes it okay. That makes
and it's just one thing that it's like, oh, like I expect to be able to track, you know, where my delivery driver is, what time it's going to be here, and if it's not, then I expect to get compensated. You know, that's just kind of. And I was reading about it, and I was like, I didn't even think about that, but that's so true. That's my expectations as a
Yeah.
borrower, as a consumer. So that's another thing that I'm just like trying to deep dive in my interviews. Like, what are we going to change when it comes to, you know, the mortgage process? What are we thinking, you know? But yeah, I think to backtrack completely, the biggest obstacle would be home prices and just the beast that seems to be home ownership, and news headlines. I think that our industry is trying so hard to break down the barriers to like educate. But when big TikToks are going viral about Blackfin buying 13 billion of real estate, as a consumer, all my friends are like, Allie, what does this mean? And I'm like, I'm going to figure it out. But I like, you know, because it's like intimidating.
Well, ask your mom, because at Chase, just for 2023, they had allocated, I think it was $26.8 billion for single family residential purchases that they were going to turn into lease.
Rent out?
Yes. So here's the reality of it. And this is something that whenever I do content about this all the time. And it gets, you know, it sounds doom and gloom, and you hate to be the bearer of bad news. And, you know, but the idea, because there's two things that are happening right now online. You see people that are, you know, clickbaiters that are showing houses on fire, and, you know, the crash is coming and all this stuff's about to happen. And I think you could maybe make that argument to some extent in commercial real estate for many, many reasons that we don't have to get into, but because there's a lot of issues that are happening there with regional banks and with people working from home and companies downsizing and all that stuff, right? So, but push that aside and let's just look at home ownership. And the inventory issue has been there since before the pandemic. Even before the pandemic, we were sitting at 3 to 4 months worth of inventory, which was enough. But in a healthy market, you need somewhere between 5 to 6 months of inventory for it to be a balanced buyers and sellers market, right?
Right.
So when there's no inventory and home prices continue to go up, and the issue is that right now is that there's no inventory on the horizon, because builders, you know, I think there's some profit stuff going on there, but ultimately they still have issues getting the supply chain, getting all their equipment in. They're finding issues with labor, and they're finding issues with land and getting land at a relatively inexpensive price to go in and put these properties on. Right. Yeah. And so you're not having a bunch of new homes being built. People are not foreclosing. This whole idea that the foreclosures are about to start, it's like 0.04% rate of foreclosure, which is like the lowest in history. Yeah. It's not happening because people have $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 worth of equity in their home. They're not going to foreclose. Okay. So the only thing that's going to cause any kind of massive shift in inventory in the market would be massive job losses. So if there was a significant recession and if there was a ton of layoffs, you could see, but even then you're talking about taking the foreclosure rate and bumping it up to maybe 1%, which is just like normal. So the bottom line is that there is no inventory on the horizon. So that just means that home prices are going to keep going up. And the issue becomes even exacerbated because the debt ceiling crisis was just kind of more or less fixed essentially, or at least for the time being. And so interest rates have started to trend back down a little bit. They were above 7% just within the last couple of weeks because of all that. And now they're trending back in the other direction. And then if we do get into a recession, which many people are predicting that's where we're headed, especially for Q3 and Q4 of this year, then you're going to see rates come down even further. And when that happens, then all the people that have been sitting on the sidelines that have been worried about rates, they're all going to come back into the market and try to buy homes. So now your demand just goes up and the supply
inventory stays the same though.
Stays the same. So prices keep going up. So it's like a broken record thing where you keep saying, or we keep saying in the industry, the best time to buy a home is right now, because it's just going to get more and more expensive. It's not going to get cheaper unless there's some black swan catastrophe that nobody's seeing coming or happening. I don't see where that happens. And there's a reason why the BlackRocks and the Chases and the Blackstones of the world are buying up all of this real estate. Okay. If the billionaires and the trillionaires are buying up real estate, there's a reason. So maybe you should be paying attention to what they're doing.
Not Blackfin. I said Blackfin earlier.
Blackstone. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. There's so many. Look, I'm sure there's an offshoot of Blackfin somewhere.
I've been sent so many TikToks about just that idea and then I was reading a Blackfin article earlier. So that's where I got.
No, it's totally fine. But that's what's happening. That's what's going on. I'm going to share
this with my friend who sent me that article because she captioned it. She's like, Allie, is the market going to crash? I'm like, I mean, we've been asking that for months. I went to
prices are up. So there were two things that were that ran recently. The Case Shiller, which is like it's kind of an all-encompassing statistical model that kind of takes home prices. And then there's FHFA, and FHFA is like the governing body for conventional loans, essentially.
Right.
And so Case-Shiller shows that home prices are down 2.3% from their peak. From their peak last June. That's the highest the home prices have been. They're down 2.3. And this is national averages, right? Because the West Coast is suffering like crazy, but Tennessee and Texas and Florida and Arizona, they're booming, right? So overall, that's down. Well, then if you take FHFA's numbers, what FHFA does is they factor out cash purchases, because if you're paying cash for a home, it's very likely that you're getting a discount because it's a short close. You know, maybe homes have been sitting there for a little bit. You're an investor. There are many reasons why often if the house is listed for $400,000 and you're a cash buyer, you're getting it for $375,000. Okay. That's just kind of how it works. But FHFA takes those out of the equation and says, okay, just for conforming conventional FHA loans, normal loans, but no cash, home prices are actually up 0.7% for those purchases. Okay.
Wow.
From their peak. This is their peak in 2022. So with all of the media about the crash coming and the rates being at 8%, which they were, it has had little to no effect other than it has slowed the growth. That's it. But as soon as the demand comes back, when rates get a little bit more under control or reasonable, if they do, which I think they will, then you're going to see the demand shoot through the roof again and prices are going to go up.
Well, and in my conversation with Dave Savage last week, he showcased just the population size that's going to be moving into, the home buying process very soon as first-time home buyers. There's going to be a huge opportunity within the next 5 to 10 years. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. But I think that it's very optimistic, and especially like it's also just breaking down like what did she mean by market crash? Like, does she understand that that's like a holistic view of like the economy? And she was just like sending me these TikToks or Instagram reels and was like, what does this mean? And so it's just taking the time, like as a loan officer, as a realtor, I think getting coffee, like you mentioned earlier, that will be a win. Like, hey, let's grab coffee. Let's talk about it. Like, I'm not going to try to sell you. The virtual environment might play a little bit of a twist on that, but that's a whole nother beast in itself. But I think just having a genuine conversation with borrowers that are seeing this and freaking out, it will be a great way to build trust. And after conversations with Kristen and analyzing some other data, trust is going to be a huge way to win business with Gen Z.
So how big of a role does technology play? I mean, obviously, when I say technology, I mean, our whole life, we carry around this thing with us on our, they sent rockets to NASA with less, or to the moon with less than this. But so our whole world is technology. But when it comes to the process of a younger buyer that's looking to purchase a home, what role does social media, technology, their phone, their sphere, how does all that play a role in their decision process? And when does that start? Does the decision process start a year ahead of time? Does it start 3 months? I mean, regardless of what it should do, what do you see as the trend of what's actually happening?
Great question. So I've had this question. I've talked with a couple different first-time home buyers, and I've asked this. So it looks like the timeline is about 2 years. And so like I've told you, long game, I can't sit here and say, I can help you get a Gen Z borrower tomorrow, because that's not how they're buying. That's not how we are researching.
Right.
I started probably this research last June when I realized I was getting into the mortgage industry, but and my goal is to own a home by the end of the year. So, but my friend who I interviewed last week, she was talking about, she did about 2 years of research. She decided she wanted to buy a home, moved to Nashville, was living in different areas of town, figuring out where she wanted to live. She was renting, but she wanted to buy. And so it's about 2 years. The first interview that I did was with a gentleman that said he put 2 years of research in. He was on Google, TikTok's how we found out about an FHA loan, Instagram. He was doing a lot of independent research. And then Kristen and I were talking about this earlier. She was talking about how when she bought a home, all of a sudden it was a month in and she was like, wait a minute, we're actually doing this. Like, this was a really quick process.
Right.
Versus me, I'm going to have an expectation that it better be really freaking quick, because I've been researching this 4 months. I've been trying to find the perfect house. I understand it's an emotional decision, but my expectation is it's going to be quick.
Yeah.
Because we're doing a ton of research. My friend from last week, She'd been listening to podcasts on her
Mhm.
on her walks for months about first-time home buyers, tricks, what to look out for during like the home buying process. So I really think that one differentiation between Gen Z borrowers and maybe millennials would be the research process. We are doing it very silently. The girl who just sent me all the Instagram stuff, she's looking at buying a home. The content she's interacting with, they have no idea.
Right.
But all of a
They're not
sudden,
liking, commenting. They're just flipping through it and seeing it. Yeah.
yeah, but they're also thinking about it.
Right.
So I think it will be a really long game. Like you and I have said, social media will be a long game, but I'd average about like 18, 24 months for like the research process independently. But when we approach a loan officer, a realtor, and we find a house that we love, the expectations is going to be high.
It's going to happen. You want it to happen quickly at that point. It's funny that you say that because in my social media journey that I've had for the last 8 or 12 months, I've noticed that whether it be because I don't, like we talked about before you came on or before we started this, like, I don't really get wrapped up in likes and comments and views.
Right.
Like you see it, it's human nature. You're going to look, oh, that's okay, this one's doing better than the other, but it's not something I lose sleep over at all. But what I have noticed is just in my everyday life now, because I post just about every single day, something that I'll go out, and whether we're at a baseball tournament with my son or we're at a volleyball tournament with my daughter or we're at the PTA meeting or wherever we're doing, somebody will say something to me. They'll say, hey, I saw that thing that you did the other day. I thought that was funny. Or, I had a question about that. Can you answer this for me? And it's really kind of what's funny is my wife and daughter and kids, they hate it, because they're like, he's walking around the driveway. We had a realtor that lived across the street from us. I didn't know. And I have a circle driveway we have about 3 acres, and I'm doing laps in my driveway in the morning and hold my camera up and talking to it and doing the whole thing. And she was doing my wife's a realtor too. And so she was doing a contract with this, and she's like, do you live across the street, in that house with the gate? And she's like, yeah. She goes, is your husband, is he always the one out there walking around in circles? She's like, yes, that's him. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. So, but it is funny that don't take for granted that just because you're not seeing the direct result from your content that shows up in likes and comments and shares and all that kind of stuff that we've been told for so long are the metrics. There's such a silent majority of people out there that are just scrolling and they see your stuff all the time. And it really, I've just started to experience that a little bit in just the short amount of time that I've been doing it.
Yeah, well, this morning I was looking through your LinkedIn to kind of figure out what you typically talk about and make sure we are on the same page. And I looked through probably 8 or 9 of your videos. I didn't like any of them. I will go back and do that if you would like. But it was just like I was looking at the content. I was seeing who you had on. But it's also a point to say, my mom gets these calls from people. She's been in the industry for 25 years. And they're like, oh my gosh, I love what Allie's doing. And I'm like, oh, who was it? Because I get like probably about 85, 90 likes per post. And she's like, oh, it was so-and-so. And I'm like, well, they didn't like it. And she's like, I'm like, oh, let me see if they liked it. And I'm like, Mom, they didn't like it. And she's like, I don't know what to say. And so it's like people see stuff and
Yes.
they like it. Maybe they don't like it. I don't know. But it's not, and I will stand by this quote, 100 posts until you see some type of traction, but also don't focus on the traction. Focus on, hey, this is fun. I like interviewing people. I like doing these things because this is adding value to my life.
Yes.
And once you focus, it's like, can't make anyone else happy to make yourself happy. And so my biggest advice for someone wanting to get started on social media, 70, 30, 10. 70 about work, 70 about like success stories, stuff at work, top of mind, industry knowledge, acronyms, whatever. 10% or 30% personal. Post your favorite story, post your workout plan, do your hot yoga. People want to know you and like you as a person, especially a salesperson that they want to do business with.
Yeah.
10, product. Hey, let's talk about product. The 70 can be a wide array of mortgage things.
Right.
It does not just have to be, let's talk about financing your home. It could literally be, oh, look at this house. Look at this interior design. Look at it. It doesn't have to be
related
product or FHA or,
right.
So 70, 30, 10, that's what I go by. And that's what, I'm hoping to incorporate onto my professional Instagram that I just started. And I'm working on stuff in the background to start slowly launching stuff on there. But that's what I've been telling my mom is she's been like, what should I be posting? I'm like 70 work, 30 personal, and 10 product.
Well, I think it's hard again for people to get started that don't do it, because if you ask people, well, what do you spend your time on? There's still 70-year-olds spend all their time on Facebook. I mean, they're using social media. They're not using social media. They are.
Mhm.
Everybody is. So then you have to realize, okay, well, what do I like to do? And that's what I always tell agents that we work with that are uncomfortable doing, because I'll get questions about it from time to time because they see the stuff that I do. And I'll say, well, what do you like to do? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, what are you passionate about? Like, what do you enjoy? Well, I like walking my dog, or I like, going to the farmer's market or whatever. I'm like, okay, well then talk about that. Like, talk about something that you enjoy doing, that you have a passion for, because that passion comes across, right? That comes across in your content, to see that you're a genuine, authentic person, that you're not trying to sell them something. Just do, but you got to do something. You got to do one, or you got to do something. So like the whole reason I even started doing this podcast stuff, because like if you go back and watch like my first 5, I'm sitting in a weird room on a chair with somebody, and it's like echoey and there's no mic, and I'm just figuring it out. Like I'm like, I
Yeah.
like to talk to people. I enjoy it. Like I enjoy having conversations like this, talking shop. You put me in a networking meeting with 25 people that want to talk about the weather and recipes, and I am out. Like, not what I want to do. But you put me in a room with one person that I find to be intelligent, that I can have a conversation with about a particular topic, I will talk all day long. And so
Yeah.
I took the idea of that with the podcast genre that already existed. And then I said, okay, well, I'll just have an hour-long conversation with people about topics related to real estate. And then I'll try to see if I can figure out how to take that content and slice it up and put it other places. But I don't have to put a whole lot of effort into coming up with some funny bit that I'm going to do, which takes a lot of production value and a lot of effort and editing. I'm just having a talk, posting it places, and just see how it works out. And
Yeah.
I just recommend that when people are starting their social media journey, to just find something that you enjoy, that's easy, that you're going to do. And I promise you, you will do it, and you'll start to slowly, build that catalog of content.
100%. I completely agree.
So, okay. So we're at an hour. It went by really, really quick.
Yeah.
So I want to be, conscious of your time. But before we go, is there anything that you would want to say about, just in general, when you're talking to realtors and mortgage professionals about, hey, if you're going to reach the Gen Z market, here's the things you need to focus on, and here's what you need to do going forward?
100%. So I think, like we talked about, social media, huge. If you are not on it, it will not be the only thing that you have to do. Thank you, Martin, for your feedback.
You got fans.
And thank you for staying on. But so basically, really, my call to action for anyone listening, anyone who wants to reach Gen Z borrowers, be on social media. If you're not, it's going to be a differentiator. People who are on it will gain business over people who are not. 2, be consistent when you're posting. 3, be very genuine about the borrower first. And I know that that's with any generation. I know I've talked to my mom, but like every interview I've done, people in my generation will see through, the coffee is for closers sale.
It's a great movie, by the way. If you haven't seen it.
Great movie. My mom made me watch it, but people in my generation are seeing through, and the worst part is they're ghosting those people who are coming across ingenuine. Yeah. So the people that are like, boom, 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 in their DMs, hey, let's talk about buying a home. Don't respond. Boom, boom, boom. We respect the approach, but it's so much more likely to be ghosted. A slow approach, genuine curiosity about the borrower will win business with Gen Z. But really just wanting to talk about it. And like, for instance, my one guy friend who is working on buying a second home, he was like, if someone just approached me and was like, hey, do you want to know how much of a home you can afford? That is a great entry question. If someone asked that to me, I'd be like, honestly, yeah. I wouldn't think that they were going to hard close me. I would just be like, okay, yeah, let's meet. Like, let's talk about it. And let me tell you what, like, my timeline is.
And there's a massive disconnect there too, because between what people want to purchase and what they want their payment to be, it's always a big gap there.
Yeah. But like knowing how much you can afford, I will get on my couch at night. I'll be watching NBA finals, and I'll be like just on my laptop researching things. And if I wanted to look up, how much of a home I can afford, if a loan officer had told me numbers, if I'm on Zillow, I can be like, ooh, I can afford this. This is cool. Or, that's a little bit outside my price range. Where can I save per month? It just gets thoughts provoked. And like, that's going to be my pointed source of financial reliability moving forward in the process, versus someone that's like, hey, let's talk about buying a home. It's more genuine.
Yeah.
But
Well,
social media number one.
I think what you're doing is great. And I think that, people look at and see what you do and go, oh, she's talking this and she's new in the industry. What does she know? But it takes a lot of, and I don't get me wrong. You're not like a police officer fire, but it's courage. It takes courage to put yourself out there, to talk to, in a way, present yourself as a knowledge center for a particular topic, especially because, again, our industry is typically a little older. And so anytime new faces come in, this is what Kristen's been able to do, and really kind of shed light on the next generation of buyers. I think it's a valuable resource, and what you're doing and the content that you're putting out and the advice that you're giving and the conversations that you're having with the people of your generation that are all saying, hey, look, this is what we're looking for. This is what we need. And if you don't want to pay attention to that as a real estate professional, then you are going to miss the boat. And that's just what it's going to be. And like you said, it's a long game. And if you don't start now and start working your way through the process of learning how to do social media and how to promote yourself, then when the time comes where that's the only avenue on which people find you, or at least 90% of them, you're going to be out of the business. And that's the unfortunate reality of it, which is why it's so important to get started as soon as you can.
100%. Well, thank you so much for having me, Mike. I am thoroughly impressed by your presence. You're on the air, like phenomenal content. Like I cannot wait to engage with your Instagram, your TikTok, your LinkedIn videos. 10 out of 10. Like I love everything y'all are doing.
Well, thank you very much. I really, really appreciate that. So, all right, guys, well, thanks to everybody that stuck around with us. And if you're watching this online later, if y'all have questions, post them out. We'll definitely answer in the comments. So everybody have a great weekend. Enjoy the summer, and we will see you next week.
Bye, guys.